Hello and welcome to etc. the podcast for episode 6 with Barry Fentiman Hall. I'm just going to read his bio here. Barry Fentiman Hall is a writer of place and the people that you find there. He has published 3 books, the most recent of which is Sketches from Wordsmithery 2020. He is the editor of Confluence Magazine. Hi Barry, how are you?
Fabulous. It's all good. It's all good. Any day that I'm not at work is a fabulous day.
Yeah, well, that's always the way. It's so cold in Ramsgate, or I'm just such a cold ass. Like I'm just waiting to finally feel warm, and I still don't.
The wind is not being kind to us. We're getting the sunshine, and this is lulling us into a false sense of security. And we go outside in shirt sleeves, and then the breeze hits us, and then we run back inside and put a coat on. This is what's happening at the moment.
That's exactly it. First off, I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about Wordsmithery and how did it begin?
Well, long ago, before I even lived in Medway, and trust me, there was a time when that was the case. I wasn't here forever. Sam Hall, as she was then, without the Fentiman part in it, was running a thing called ME for Writers, which was more of a sort of just a general sort of get together sort of salon group that did little publications and events and things like that. Which I crashed into sort of midway along. There's a few people still around that were involved in that. Sarah Jenkin was an ME4 Writers, and Roy Smith was, and one or two other people. Roy's not really around now. And somehow along the way, it morphed into a sort of proper company where we sort of pitch for getting funding for things and put stuff on, and that became Wordsmithery maybe, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. And we started out publishing books for people that wanted to get stuff out there, and all of my stuff has come out on Wordsmithery.
And thank God it has. Thank God it's out there.
Yeah, we've sort of moved on to doing much bigger things really these days. We will hopefully soon see the fruition of the Dickens 150 poetry trail, which said Sarah Jenkin is on, and me and one or two other people. We won't give all the names away yet, but their work will be up on the wall in massive A1 placards around Medway and the environs. I think we can call it Dickens 150 plus 1 because something happened last year and it seemed to put everything out of joint. Can't think what it was.
Yeah, what was that thing?
Yeah, so that's going to happen soon as well. The sort of 5th, much delayed installment of An Assemblance of Judicious Heretics is going to hit as an online thing. Those that don't know, that was a thing where for years we got people to write about a thing and then we gave it to artists with the names taken off, and they would make a thing, then we'd smash it all together and they would meet for the first time and go, oh my God, in various ways. People have got, pretty much got together literally over this thing over the years. We're very proud of that. This is all things that are about to happen when people are allowed out again. No, I lead no one. I fake it well. I think where events and things like that are concerned, everybody's willing to give somebody a go and see how you do. And basically, all you've got to do is keep turning up and keep doing what you say you were going to do. And if you do that, people will be happy to work with you. It's just simply hitting your mark and keeping doing it.
Yeah,
and
good.
Keeping the quality high as well, because it's there is a certain, it's not bad in a way because I think it's very supportive of people, but there is a certain atmosphere of everything is awesome in some places, and we've never gone down that road. Anything we put on, we want it to be as good as we can make it.
Yeah.
That's always a bit of a watchword with us.
When did you start Confluence Magazine then, and what do you look for as an editor?
Now then, well, Confluence Magazine started as a sort of A4 zine type thing that was made on an ancient machine down Intra in Chatham. And I'm trying to think exactly how long it's been going now. Probably about 4 years. I think 4. Yeah, and it's changed a bit over the years. It's to A5 now, and it's got a bit more spiffy. And now we only do 2 a year, but we make them bigger. And there are people. The one rule we have with it is it's kind of always been where the Delta meets the world. We try to always have a number of local writers again, they've got to make the standard. We're not just going to put anybody in just because they're from Upner. It's not going to work that way. But luckily, we've always had, because we know that there's a very good crop of people who on rotation will send things in. So we're always good on that score. And the other half of the magazine is given over to everywhere from Albuquerque to Alberta. You know, it's just, we could get anyone. We had a lot of Canadians in the last one.
I noticed that, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why that was. We just got a load of really good Canadian stuff sent to us. We just look for good poetry. A lot of people think they need to write about rivers. That's not actually a deal breaker. You don't have to. You could write about anything. But we just want it to be a good poem that works on the page. Doesn't need to be formal. In fact, we very, very rarely publish things that formally rhyme. But we did do one in the last one, which was really quite brilliant. Because the thing with rhyming poetry, as you'd be well aware, is there's always that bit where it jars. It's like, this is good, this is good, this is good. You've put that word in just because it rhymes, haven't you? And that's where it all falls to bits. And there's some people that are very, very good at it. Pauline Holmes is very, very good at rhyming poetry. There are some people who can just do it. I'm not one of them. I've had about 6 goes at that in my life, and I tend to not really do it very well. But yeah, really, that's just it. And slowly but surely, we're attracting some very good talent to the magazine. You know, we had a Bridport Prize winner in the last one, which I was very surprised to get. This is what you tend to find out: is people who are really, really good are really, really nice, because they haven't got any problems about status, so they don't give you any grief over email. It's great.
You just can't, though. You just even if you know you're bad, just don't be that person.
People will do it. People will do it. They, I don't know. There are, I suppose, anybody that writes and puts it out there in the world has an ego. Everybody that does. I mean, you know, there's people right on a spectrum on that. But you know, there's people out there who definitely feel, you know, they have a worth and they want you to know it.
What tips would you give to someone submitting, not just to Confluence, but also just generally wants to put submissions together?
Well, a lot of the magazines will say this in their submissions guidelines. And here's the thing right at the off: read the guidelines. Read all of them. There's a lot of standard stuff. 90% of the magazines out there will demand that your stuff hasn't been published before. But there's also published and published. And they will often have little wrinkles about that, and make sure you know. Because it's very embarrassing later on if they sort of decide they want it, and then you realize that you've actually not met what they want you to do, and then you have to tell them to pull it out again because the editor's not going to like you. They've got the magazine together, the copy's done, everything's done, and now you have to withdraw something and they have to start again. But yeah, make sure you absolutely know what they're asking for. If they say they want 4 poems, do not send 6. You know, if they say they want it on an attachment, do not send it in the body of the email, or do not send a link. Do not send a video. You know, these are all things that actually do happen.
It's so simple. Just do the thing that's asked for. You know, just do the thing that's asked for.
Clearly, people do not. We get less of it now than when we started. I think when you start, people throw all sorts at you and think, oh, they're new, they'll take it. And to an extent, they may have a little bit of a point on that. But once you get established and you get more people sending things in, you get less of that happening. But we do still always get it. You know, I think the record is I got sent basically somebody's collection, and they asked me to pick the bits I liked. And what I'll always do is I'll read the first 5. And if I like them, one of them's going to go in, and that's all I'm going to do, because I'm not going to read his book. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. I think
and also make sure you have it together. There was a submission that we got on the last issue that was, well, I mean, it was unclear to me where one poem stopped and another one began. You know, that's just basic having your ducks in a row. You know, and people who are reading this stuff, they do want to give it their best sort of time and their best concentration, but they've probably just read 10 submissions in a row. And if yours is all over the place and they can't fathom it out and the font goes funny here and all this sort of stuff, it's not going to go well with you. You know, unless it's absolutely brilliant, but you do tend to find those two things don't often go together. So yeah, there is that. And also, you know, do read, not just the magazine you're sending to. Read as much poetry as you can, not necessarily from the reason of copying it or anything, but it shows you what's possible. You know, there's things that you'll read and say, oh, really? I see. Right. Oh, Billy Collins has done that, has he? Right. So, you know, if it's all right with Billy Collins, it's all right with me. That sort of thing. So, yeah, absorb as much, follow the rules, send the best stuff you've got, and don't annoy the editor.
Speaking of ego, I was reading some of the poems on your Facebook, and I feel like your poetry has some of the least ego I've seen in contemporary poetry. It's really, I mean, you do, obviously, you know, you write about yourself or whoever the I speaker is, but it's really not me, I. It's very, like you say, of people and places. Why do you think that is? What draws you to those things?
I mean, I'm an observer a lot. I mean, certainly in sketches, certainly very much in sketches. That's character studies of people that I see and things that I see around Medway, particularly. That's all of my Medway observational poems stuck in a pot because I had to do something with them. And I think England, My Dandelion Heart was a bit like that on a bigger scale. There was some personal ones in there, but not so many. I mean, there's another poet that we know. I won't name him, but he always says that, like, he fears to put the word I in a poem. And I also try to avoid that. I mean, there are some where you can't avoid it. If it's totally about me, and some are. I mean, the next collection might be a bit different because a lot of that are going to be memory poems, things to do with my past and my childhood and stuff like that. So there is going to be a lot more me in that one. But you don't want to let it take over. There's a couple of sorts of poetry that you often get sent as an editor, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it sort of follows a trope. You get a lot of goddess poetry. It's like, I am amazing and fear me. And sometimes it is brilliant and it absolutely is worth publishing, and we do. I think we definitely put a couple in the last one. And blokes tend to do it as sort of how Buck was Majowski, and they'll want to tell you about what sort of dives they go to and how much blues they listen to and how much whiskey they drink and how many dames they've met. And this is a thing you get with that as well. And in both of these, there's an awful lot of rampaging ego that goes on. Sometimes it's great, but you do tend to get also an awful lot of poetry that's written by 50-year-old white men that are blues poems. And I don't know why that is. I have no idea why it is. Poor old Sidney Keys, who was a wartime poet who got killed when he was 21, was writing he wrote some really bloody brilliant poetry to say that he only lived to that age. But he also wrote some atrociously, butt-achingly embarrassing blues poems when he was 17 years old, which used some language in there that, frankly, we wouldn't put in these days. I don't know why that is. Why is it? Let's put it out there. Why is it that old white guys write blues poems? Let's put it out there to the satire.
If anyone listening to this, message the page and let us know.
Tell me. We want to know.
Yeah. Also, you write about England just so devastatingly, like with everything going on at the moment and all the disillusionment and just everything in disarray. And I don't think there's anyone. I mean, I read a lot of poetry, I think. I mean, I don't know. I might not read a lot of poetry, but I think I do. And I don't think anyone's writing about England as much or in the same way or as effectively.
Well, I mean, I do get the feeling that certainly from the poems that are in England, My Dandelion Heart, they sort of begin around 2015. That's when they were starting to be written, and I think it came out in 2018. And during that point, over that point, we've had the referendum the year after I started writing that stuff. And England's become a strange place in the last 5 years. You know, all of a sudden, I mean, there's always been racists. They've always been out there. There's always been that out there. But it just seems that we've become extremely ghettoized, and very, very much drawing back from the rest of Britain. You know, England is becoming very, very much. And the problem with England has always been is its sense of self is derived from what it isn't.
Yeah.
You know, we're not the French, and we're not Scottish, and we're not this. We're and you know, right back to God is an Englishman if you want to go back far enough.
Mm.
And it's a very particular sort of character, I find. And I'm from England, and I say that I'm very much of the opinion that actually it probably would be best if the UK split up. I think everyone would be a lot happier.
Mm.
It would unfortunately leave us in the situation where we'll probably have conservative governments to the end of time. But you know, hey, everything shakes out in the end. Who knows on that score? But it's the place where I live, and it's where I observe, and I've lived in a lot of places in it, which has kind of
Yeah.
maybe given a bit of a perspective. I lived in the north of England till I was 30, in about half a dozen different towns, and then I came to the south, and I've lived all across the south, and you know, so it's given me a little bit of a sort of. The odd thing is, I do find actually is when I go back to Yorkshire to do events there, I'm kind of from there, but I'm not of it anymore. I find that my poetry is different to what the people that I know as friends who are still
Mm.
in the West Riding are writing. I write about it now with 20 years distance to it, or
Mm.
20 years and 200 miles. It's like I'm looking at it from someone who knows it well, but I don't belong to that crowd anymore. So that's maybe why there's a sort of distant echo thing with the stuff that I write about the North now, because I don't really know it over the last 20 years. You know, I'd be making it up if I did.
Mm.
You know, I'd have more clue telling you about acne, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Brighton till I was 20, and then I moved here, and I was just like, what's going on? And it's been like 10 years of no, seriously, what's going on? But you know, maybe I'll get used to it at some point. Um,
To a certain
yeah,
extent, we're no longer the person we were 10 years ago. I think to an extent that's what happens. You know,
yeah, yeah. I've just finished the Unbearable Sheerness of Being,
oh, it's
and
an old one.
do you know what? It was absolutely brilliant, and um, I didn't think anyone could make Sheerness romantic, or not romantic, but anyone could put a bit of distance between themselves and Sheerness, and in order to actually observe it. And you know, you've done it amazingly. What made you want to write about Sheerness?
Well, that was the first commission I ever got. Sometime, oh heck, I think the gestation of that begins around 2014 or even earlier. There was a thing called Wandering Words, and basically I was at the time when that came through. I was working nights in the Royal Mail in Stroud, and bleary-eyed, I looked at my emails on my phone, and it said, "Here, would you like to go to Sheerness and write about Sheerness, and we'll give you money?" And I thought, this has got to be a scam. This is going to be asking me for my bank details in a minute. Then I sort of checked it out, and it turned out it was true. And it said, "Hey, would you like to do this thing? And we'll pay you. Go to Sheerness and write about it." So I said, "All right then, yeah, I will." And it really inspired me. I mean, most people wrote 2 or 3 poems for it because that was all that was asked, but they just kept rolling out. And I think I was fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by edges, where one thing turns into another. And Sheppey is very other. Sheppey's, you know, it's an inhabited island off England, you know. And if you go back to World War II, you had to have papers to go to Sheppey. You weren't allowed to cross the Swale without them. I love stuff like that. And the more that you burrow, there's sort of, you know, there's a Beowulf link to Sheppey. Apparently, a lot of the arcane English scholars fight like loudly about that, about whether it does or it doesn't, but there's a lot of them who think it does. And it just has a lot of peculiarities about it. I mean, there's 1,400 tons of TNT death just lurking off Sheerness, ready to blow it to kingdom come should it ever, you know, happen. And 1 or 2 other things to do with that. There's a guy that fascinates me. He was quite a famous poet and author in the 50s and 60s called Uwe Johnson. And he was having quite a big career, and he lived in Manhattan. And for some reason in 1974, he decided to move to Sheerness. And he lived there for the last 10 years of his life, and he got to know the people quite well. And England being England, they couldn't really say his name properly, so he became known as Charlie. And he was okay with that. He just got on with them. And he was fine, and he had his spot in the Napier, and they poured his drink, you know, all this sort of stuff. And he was fascinated with this place, and I am fascinated with it too in that respect. It's a place that's very, very enclosed. You know, it's very, very it's got a boundary of the sea all around it, and it is a very different place. It's part of Kent, but it's a really different place, and the people there see themselves differently. And you know, this is something I like to go. And again, you know, I end up sitting in a pub and crashing someone's 18th birthday party. And she really did stand on my shoe in spike heels. That's where a poem comes from. And she was very nice about it, and it was a really nice evening. Yeah, I just found it to be an incredibly inspiring place. And just weird things happen there, like the piano man showing up out of the blue, and no one knew who he was.
Spontaneity is what you need in life, really. And I feel like a lot of the spontaneity has been sort of sucked out. But if you can find it somehow, then that's the good stuff, you know.
And like Sheerness has really suffered. It's suffered in the way that Chatham has, but Chatham's got a little bit more of a centre of gravity to it. It's a bigger place. It's got other stuff around it. Sheerness is a bit cut off, and they lost the Navy 25 years before Chatham did. And all the steelworks shut and everything, you know, all that's gone, massive unemployment, that sort of thing. And, you know, people have to rely on themselves a lot. It's when that happens, you know, you're always going to have plenty to write about.
Do you think that all the poetry that we do actually touches the lives of people that aren't poets? And does that matter?
I think it does to an extent. I mean, I would hate to think that the only people who ever read my work or actually went to see me do it were poets. You know, I mean, it's nice to see faces, you know, but if I go to a reading and I look out and all I can see is a dozen people that are all just waiting to get up and do their stuff, something inside me, you know, you want it to be a bit wider than that. And we've always worked in doing the things that we do in Wordsmithery to try and make that the case. And I think it depends. I think people like a bit of they like a bit of stardust as well. You know, we had an event at the Brook Theatre where we had Henry Normal come, and we were able to charge quite a bit to get in because he's that man off Radio 4. And all of a sudden, when you've got that, you got a ton of people that turned up there for what was essentially a 2-hour poetry reading that you never see ordinarily. You know, they want to be entertained, so they want that man off the radio. But there are loads of people out there that are just as good as Henry Normal. You know, not to knock Henry at all, he's great. But there's half a dozen people I know in Kent that are easily his equal as a performer and a poet. It's just they haven't had that break or whatever it is, or they haven't wanted to do it. You know, sometimes I shiver slightly when people talk about the poetry business or the industry, because it is and it isn't. I mean, if you're Simon Armitage, yeah, I mean, it's your daily bread. It's you get up and it's what you do because this is how you pay your mortgage, assuming you've still got one. But for a lot of people, for you, for me, it's something that we try to do as well as we can and try and reach people.
Yeah.
Because say, for instance, in Sheppey, you know, I've done readings in Sheppey, and that's the toughest gig I've ever done with that book because I'm talking about them. And, you know, to reflect their lives back to them and try and show them something different about it, which is essentially all you're ever trying to do in poetry, really. Even if you're talking about yourself, you're still universalizing an aspect of yourself and expecting other people to be interested in it.
Maybe it's just that people that go to poetry gigs, you know, or just all happen to be poets because they like poetry. Maybe it's nothing to do with we're not reaching people, or you know, they just want to have their turn. Maybe it's just like if you go to a jazz show, everyone just plays a bit of jazz on the side. Like I suppose
they do. Now I get it. It's great. You know, but I mean, you do occasionally just want to see a lot of faces that you know don't write. Just now and again. And certainly when Ace sends you a ton of money, that's who they're wanting you to find. That's the whole idea about it. And you know it's well, here you are. Here's 5,000 quid. Go to this place and try and get people interested in something that they haven't hitherto been interested in. Off you go. You've got 2 years. You try and do it. And Smithry ever did was the Wordshed during Fuse Festival, and still that was 2012, I think. and still we get people coming up to us in the street in Medway and asking us when it's on again.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And that's 9 years ago now, and we still do get them. And the kids loved it. The kids absolutely loved it because they got to go and sit in that chair and do whatever it is they wanted for a whole minute, write anything, sing a song, anything they wanted to do. And just to give people that voice it's an important thing, I think.
How can you be a confident performer? Because you don't really fluff up or anything, and you read quite evenly, quite loud, with a good voice and everything. So how can you be a confident performer?
Practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
All you can do. I mean, whatever your temperament is, and there are some people that I know that absolutely can never do it. There's one really, really good writer that I know from Medway, and they will never read their own stuff. And I even sat with them for an hour once and went through all that it was that was needed for them to do it, and they still never done it. And that's fine. Some people are just not temperamentally geared for doing it. But so taking it on a sort of base level, I mean, however sort of far on that continuum you are from really, really scared to not bothered, just practice. Your words will look after you. If you've done the work in actually making good poetry, then even if your voice is a squeak, even if it's the plummiest received pronunciation that's ever existed, sort of clearly semi-royal, or someone from Glasgow, it doesn't matter. It will come across if you've done the work. Yeah. And I also think that what's very important on those lines is use your own voice. I certainly have encountered people who I've been chatting to at the bar, and then they get up, and that voice that they're using on stage is not how they talk.
Yes, I've seen that.
I think people can tell that.
Yeah,
I definitely think that comes through. It's like, absolutely be yourself, because you can't be anybody else, unless you are adopting a persona. If that's what you do, if that's your thing, then that's fine. But that's a character that you've made. But there again, you've got Attila the stockbroker. He's still John Bain. He's exactly the same guy, even though he's got another name. And he couldn't be anybody other than John Bain. But it's I think that's the thing. But practice, do it, even if you're not going to read it from memory. And I do think that gets over-egged. I think there's far too much store set by being able to remember a piece. You're not an actor. The people don't necessarily expect you to know it. I think I've only ever done one piece from memory in the whole time I've been doing it. Because I think I would spend, knowing my personality, I would spend more energy on trying to remember what I was going to say next than making it sing and dance. I will always read. I don't think that sort of performance poetry is ever going to be a way that I'll go.
Similar to you, I feel like if you trust the words, even if you're not confident, if you're confident about the work, then you're away, then it's fine.
And remember that people are on your side. They're not there to see you fall flat on your face. Poetry crowds, by and large, are not like that. I've come across one or two, but by and large, they are not. And they want you to succeed. So don't worry about them all sort of laughing at you, because they aren't gonna. They're not gonna at all. Unless you are actually quite famous and you clearly haven't prepared, and you're too smashed to actually remember what to do, which I've seen a couple of times. And well, if you're a pro, that was on you. People are going to laugh at that.
I must say, I do think that's a good tip. Don't get smashed before you read.
Yeah. I mean, a loosener is all right. I tend to do that myself, but I think going beyond the bounds, we've all done it, and I think once we've got up there, we've all realised the error of our ways. Very careful about that these days.
Yeah. Have you got one or two pieces that you could read?
I have. I believe you asked me to find two of mine and two from other people.
Yeah, two favourites.
Which way round would you like me to do?
However.
Two favourites. We'll do two favourites first. We'll do two favourites, because that means I'm going to have to somehow follow Simon Armitage and Jenny Joseph, which is not going to be easy, but I'll try. Big sigh from the poetry capital of the world, West Yorkshire, that gave us Ted Hughes, Simon Armitage, and Sarah L. Dixon. So this poem by Simon Armitage. Now, I used to play cricket a long time ago, and this is a very short poem, and they're not easy to pull off, and it absolutely captures a moment that I've experienced in a match. And of course, it doesn't matter. I was playing for a pub team, but right at that moment, it matters more than anything else. And it's called The Catch, and it goes a bit like this: forget the long smouldering afternoon. It is this moment when the ball scoots off the edge of the bat, upwards, backwards, falling seemingly beyond him, yet he reaches and picks it out of its loop like an apple from a branch, the first of the season. And that's why Big Si is the Poet Laureate. Indeed. Not easy to do that in 12 lines. This other one I'm going to do is a little bit longer, and it's a bit of a crowd pleaser. And I was only mentioning this to someone the other day about wearing her red hat. And this is, it's about a woman getting older, but I think it could be about anyone getting older and how to do it outrageously and disgracefully. And it's called Warning. When I'm an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick the flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children, and we must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly when I am old and start to wear purple. I absolutely love that poem. Jenny Joseph has given us a fine thing there. Anyway, to me. Oh, that's my brethren in Yorkshire, I'm afraid. What can I do? We fall into the Chuckle Brothers so easily. Anyway, I'm going to do a couple of poems that were, hopefully I can find them. Yeah, one is published and one isn't. And they both relate to people that are and have been poets in Kent that have been incredibly inspiring to me and have been a great help to me in the past. Now, I don't know if he'll forgive me for this because I don't think he's ever read it and I don't think he's ever heard me do it. But this is in the book called Sketches, available from Wordsmithery still, folks. And this is called Watching a Spider Die in December While Bill Lewis Reads Poetry. There are caroling the air as artists sell their wares to each other. Foxes scream at the moon because they are confused about their identity. Disturbances are felt in the silk of a lifetime's weaving. Green and black stripes, worn peckish birds, pretty as a Christmas bauble hung from a real tree, tapping at the strands of her life as sure as a first violin. It is cold. She does not know what cold is. There are words shaking her world. She does not know what words are. The drum is beating slower now. Slower. Slower. Suspended, spinning on her axis, she is a slipper moon on a frosty night, still now. Beautiful. And that was a story of a little spider that I saw outside of Bill Lewis's book launch at the back end of, when would it have been? 2019 now. That was the last sort of year that things like that happened. But that was the nucleus. And this one has never been published. I've submitted it a few places, but it hasn't yet gone anywhere. And it is about and for and in tribute to and in remembrance of one Rosemary McLeish, and wherever she may be. And this is called "The Field is Dark and the Bee Sleeps." The field is dark and the bee sleeps as the dust settles on another summer, slowly like crab jam cooling on an endless check cloth kitchen table. There are lights somewhere. It is hard to say how they come, like far-off cars caught on film, becoming one car and one light. The smell of turned earth after rain, waiting winter green seeds spread from the hand, like stars from the god who always seems to get into poems. Spinning like an afternoon hit with the rush of 5 gins, the bee is in my head, drowsy, tumbling, exhausted on the table. Climbing up the side of the jam jar, wings vibrating, bombus falling. Cannot get a grip. Waggle dancing, red under the skin and godless. The sound of steel being rolled, rattling in pastel corridors, wet with voices that sound familiar, like other voices, but not correct. A crying world chattering faintly, gas frying potatoes in old fat, low spoken, some secret past between faces in a painting. The jam is ready now and sweet, an elusive frequency of tired sugar, drifting on sedated August air. Yes, the field is dark and the bee sleeps.
That was stunning, Barry. Thank you. I miss Rosemary a lot too, and I wrote the last time I saw Passion Flower Vine about her, and
I think it might have got in a magazine recently.
Yes, I think it might have got into Confluence, yeah, and
might have done just that. Yeah, I don't think there was any doubt.
Yeah, she was incredible. Just an amazing influence, amazing friend.
Had she? I mean, it's all ifs and buts now. But I mean, had she had some encouragement younger from people and had more confidence younger, then I think she would have been probably one of the top voices in British poetry.
Absolutely.
I have no doubt in that. She was a very, very high standard.
Well, I think that this, just people that we know, ordinary people, it's by no means in many cases an amateur scene. I mean, this is really, really talented people.
Yeah, I mean, we are very, very lucky in that respect. It's the only way we get away with it with Confluence, to have this, this sort of quite ego-ish idea. You get egoistic, I should say, that we've got this area where we can just pull this much talent and put it up against anybody. But we do it again and again. I think really Confluence will only wear out when we can't actually find any more new people coming through. And actually the scene that sort of operates in this area now is quite different to what it was 10 years ago. There's some people have faded away completely, and there's some whole new voices that have come in that are brilliant. So that's always, that turnover is always going to happen.
Yeah. Two people I really did enjoy in the last issue of Confluence. There was another. It was nice to see another Iranian name in there. His surname was
Reza.
Reza. Yeah, Reza. His surname was too Iranian for me to remember, but
Garamenzadeh.
That's it. Oh my God, that's so bad of me. I'm such a bad Iranian. Him, and also Dylan as well. Dylan Stallard. Nice to see his stuff on paper. I've never seen it on paper.
Dylan Stallard. I mean, I've never seen his stuff on paper before. I've done. I did radio with him years ago, and I thought he was great then. And I'm really glad to see the way that he's progressed. He was good then, and he's kept on and he's kept on. And his use of form in those poems was very, very good. And they hit home. And to have 2 short poems that really, really punch like that. And actually, Reza, am I pronouncing? Is it Reza or is it Reza?
It's Reza. Yeah, I've got an uncle called Reza. Yeah.
What happened with that is that's one of the very few rhyming poems that we've ever really gone for, and I thought it works beautifully. The whole Havisham thing. I love imagined conversations of famous people in literature. I like stuff like that. And I think that got carried off really well. I think he's based in Northern Ireland, which is good because it's less on postage.
Yeah. What's your favorite gig that you've ever done? Do you have one?
Let's see. I really enjoyed doing the big anniversary thing at Haworth Parsonage. That was lovely. I got invited up there as a sort of Hail Mary last ditch by Mark Connors. He said, "Can you get here by next week?" And I said, "I'll buy me ticket. I will." 7 hours on Megabus later, but it was worth it. And it had one of the best ever signs by the parsonage up to where the tent was, where they were doing the poetry. It said poetry and birds of prey. And there was a tent next to it with loads of falcons and stuff in it as well. I was quite, I was very close to just binning it off and stealing a kestrel called Timmy because he was so cute and going off and having adventures with him on the wild and windy moors. I'd got challenged by Mark on the way up to write a poem about the Brontes, which I had not done at that point. And it was during that summer where it never rained. You remember during I was 18, it must have been 2018, because it was that summer where it just did not rain. And I got up to Bradford, and finally the heavens broke, and the rain was bouncing as high as your head. It came down so hard. And this bloke ran out in the taxis, and he was dancing like a lunatic. And he was just banging on the roofs of it, and he was getting soaking wet. I think he may have been imbibing substances. And I've got him. And that's where a poem called Lovely Monster came from. Of this mad, crazy Heathcliff type character running around in the rain, tapping on people's car windows. And I thought, oh, thank God for that. I've actually got a poem to read tomorrow. So that was the most relieved gig, probably. But yeah, there's been stacks. I mean, there was one at Broadstairs Library, I remember. No, it wasn't. It was it's that bar that's got the library in it, the chapel. That was a really nice one. And there's probably one that like Sam will belt me for later on that I should be remembering. I don't know. I mean, opening for Attila the Stockbroker was quite good.
Yeah, that must have been cool.
Probably somebody else would be better off telling me what was the best one, because I don't know. It's hard to remember. There's been some really good ones.
I can't remember either. I just think they're fun to do largely, and you just have a good time. I couldn't tell you what's my favorite or anything like that. Well, thank you for talking to me today. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And what's the future got in store for you, poetry wise?
Well, I've been writing this book forever called Neanderthal, which is a sort of, well, it's turning into a sort of 400-page long beat poem about walking up and down the Medway, really. Well, actually, I don't even know what you're going to call it. I've spent most of this morning transcribing graffiti from a walkway that goes from Sheerness to Queenborough, which I've called the Rite of Passageway, because it's enclosed and it goes around the outside of the dockyard and it goes all the way from Sheerness to Queenborough down the side of the river. And it's got clearly every year that's come out of school have signed it since about 1990. And all the names are down there, absolutely covering every inch of it from every year or back about 30 years past. And it just fascinates me. I just wonder what they're doing now. Some of them are probably grandparents by now.
Oh,
and,
wow.
It's got back there saying, Casey loves Steve, 1992, and all this sort of stuff. And it's got all the years they graduated. So, yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. So hopefully that book will come out in the next year or two. There's going to be a book of quite personal poetry coming out, which might be called the history of trees or something like that. I don't know what title it'll have yet. One of the poems will suggest a title at some point, but those ones I've done about my mother and father, like the man who walked away from himself and stuff like that.
Oh, they're stunning.
They're all going to go in
there. They're gorgeous poems.
And Wordsmithery wise, the big Dickens thing this summer, and we'll get all those boards up there finally, and an semblance of Judicious Heretics. And after that, who knows? We might start doing live gigs again.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Barry.
I'm supposed to be doing the Estuary Festival in Chatham in June, but I don't know what date, so I can't tell you.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that one. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. I hope you have a nice and peaceful evening.